Trey, I got to ask you about two teams. I grew up in Western Canada, and I grew up at a time when the AFL still existed. So that's how old I am. And you had to love the Raiders, and you had to like the Denver Broncos. So what the heck is Sean Payton going to be able to do with an old Russell Wilson in order to turn that team around?
Well, yeah, let's start. I just actually had a one-on-one with Sean for the 33rd team. We went to a lot of stuff. I asked him. I said, Sean, and it's on their website. And anybody listening can go check it out. I said, Sean, what about this situation made it the place for you? I mean, they were a disaster last year. For most of last season, Russell Wilson had more bathrooms in his house, 12, than touchdown passes on the season. I mean, it was epically bad, And he said a couple of things. One, I don't believe that was Russell Wilson. And obviously, in another interview, he scorched Nathaniel Hackett for a bad coaching job. And I can get into that for a second because I think that there's some interesting things there. But he believes that he can have the same relationship with Russell that he had with Drew Brees in New Orleans. Because remember, when Sean and Drew went to New Orleans, there were no expectations. Sean failed a physical. And by the way, that's one of the things for this Making Waves podcast, which will be interesting. What happens if Miami doesn't fail Drew Brees? And does he go to Miami? Do they have the same run that the Saints eventually had? And that's that Amazon Wondery podcast, which will be fun to do. So, nobody wanted Drew Brees. Nobody wanted Sean Payton. And, they're coming off a season where they were traveling everywhere because of Hurricane Katrina. It was a mess. It was an absolute mess. And they found a way to make it work. So he likes the challenge. He also said he likes the idea of the tradition in Denver, and he really likes the new ownership group, which I think is a very strong thing. I mean, like when you get Walmart money, look at Stan Kroenke. Like he's managed to do things okay for the Rams, although last year was a disaster. So he liked those two things, but it has to start with Russell Wilson. It has to start. Russell has got to be the Russell that was peak Seattle, and not the last couple of years in Seattle or the disaster of last year. Now, it certainly hurts that Tim Patrick looks like he's gone for the season again after another injury. But if Russell can rebound, they have a really good defense. Like when Vic Fangio was there, no defense played Patrick Mahomes tougher than the Denver Broncos defense. So that there are parts of that defense that are good. And if Russell Wilson can get back to being where he was, I think the Broncos can be much more relevant than they were last year. The Raiders are a much different story. I don't know what's going to happen there. They, obviously the Jimmy G thing was sort of their backup position. I was not a huge Derek Carr doubter. I like Derek Carr. I'm not saying he's a top 5 quarterback, but he's not a terrible quarterback by any stretch of the imagination. And if you're bringing in Jimmy Garoppolo, my question is how much of that is an upgrade, or is it a downgrade, or is it the same thing than what you had in Derek Carr? And, you look at the division, and where do you rank the Raiders in a division that has Sean Payton rejuvenated and anxious to get going again, the Kansas City Chiefs. And then obviously we talked about Justin Herbert and the Chargers. So, the Raiders to me are looking up at everybody else right now.
So, Trey, you said you wanted to talk about Sean Payton. I'll just give you my quick thought, and then you can sort of play off that. I think it's very, very I appreciate when a coach actually is honest, or at least saying something that he believes, because you never hear this ever. They're always obviously intentionally not giving you an opinion. And I think Sean Payton in some ways was trying to protect Russell Wilson, who I, by the way, do not expect to have a decent year. I don't think he's the same quarterback as he was in Seattle. And then the reaction, and this is where I want to ask you about, was twofold. Obviously, there were people who were criticizing Payton, and he sort of backtracked. Some said that it's going to hurt Russell Wilson because it puts more pressure on him. I'm not sure I buy that. I just bought it as this is a guy who he's trying to get a relationship with his new quarterback, and he's basically saying the other guy screwed up. My quarterback is still good. And I would think in some ways Russell Wilson and the offense had to like that, because it's like my new coach has our back. How did you see
Yes. I agree with that. And the thing about it, which I think is funny, we always tell people, hey, in the media, hey, just be honest with us. And then when they're honest with it, they're like, why did you say that? No, you want that. You want them to give you the unvarnished, honest truth, not the, I'm just here to talk about Cincinnati. We're on, like the Bill Belichick spiel. By the way, I think this could be potentially Bill's last year in New England. We should probably talk about that, because that could be very interesting. But to the Payton point, I try and tell this to people all the time, more often than not, two things are true at the same time, right? Number one, Nathaniel Hackett was terrible last year. Let's just be honest. Like, it was terrible. Like, the first game of the regular season, they had to burn 30 seconds before they figured out to call a timeout to kick the second longest field goal attempt in NFL history to try and either tie that game or win it. I can't remember what it was. That's bad coaching. It was bad coaching. Okay, it was bad coaching. And Aaron Rodgers and Nathaniel Hackett have worked together for many, many years in Green Bay with great results in terms of what it did for Aaron Rodgers, back-to-back MVP seasons. Okay, so there's a relationship that Aaron has with Nathaniel Hackett that is deep and has been proven successful. That is a true thing. The other true thing is Nathaniel Hackett was not a good head coach last year. That is also a true thing. That is so both things can be true at the same time. And I'll add a third one in. Most coaches don't say what Sean Payton said. So all three of those things are true at the same time, and people are freaking out about it. I'm like, guys, let's just enjoy it. It gives us what we want. It gives us the content. And I do believe what he was saying, in a way, to your point, Richards, was, hey, Russell wasn't the problem. That guy was the problem. And every player wants to feel like their coach has their back. And I think that's why it was a mass. I mean, Aaron Rodgers can say whatever he wants, and Robert Saleh can say whatever he wants, blah, blah, blah. You guys haven't won a damn thing together. Go win something, okay? Then be relevant December 15th, and then we'll have this discussion. But Sean Payton did the thing that I think his players loved. He said, I have your back.
Yeah. Well, tell you what, it's interesting you say that, because my background is in the National Hockey League, which I'm not sure you people in the United States have ever heard of. But that's okay. That's another story for another day. And the greatest coach
We'll
of all
go
time,
full Nelson Emerson on you. I will go Nelson Emerson on you.
Oh, there you go.
I will go Craig Janney. I will go Jeff Brown, St. Louis Blues. Let's go. What do you want?
All right. That's good. I'm proud of you.
Maybe Stephon Matteau. Come on.
Scotty Bowman was the greatest coach in the history of the National Hockey League. He went into the broadcast industry and came back much more transparent and a much better coach. Here we go. Sean Payton spends his year at Fox and comes back perhaps more transparent and a better coach. Because I think, when you leave the fraternity and your eyes get open to, is that what the expectation of a coach is? I mean, why isn't he giving us more? Maybe Sean has a learning curve there.
Well, it's interesting because I think a lot of people go through that in every profession. And I'll give you an example. There's a former NFL referee who was did it for years, top of his profession, Super Bowls, the whole thing. And then he went to work for a television network, and he's a friend of mine. And he said to me, Trey, when I was refereeing, I thought we did an amazing job. And then I watched the game the way you guys watch the game, and he thought, man, we are not good at all. And it gave him an extra perspective, right? And I do feel like the NFL is not helping these guys. And I think the NFL referees union is not helping these guys. The thing that could help the refs would be let them see the game the way we see it. Give them the sky judge. The Chiefs rule a couple of years ago, and they've sort of implemented it with not telling us, just over the last couple of years, a little bit more like, let's go to New York. No, that was good. That was a mistake. Fix it. If the NFL refs could see the game the way we see it, I think that they would call it very, very differently. I mean, years ago, I was flying back from something in LA, and I saw this guy charting notes and was playing. I said, are you with a team? He goes, no, I'm a referee. And I said, oh, well, you guys, it was just it was after the NFC Championship game between the Saints and the Chiefs, the Saints and the Rams, where they missed the obvious pass interference call on Nickel Roby-Coleman. And that, if that hit doesn't happen, the Rams don't go to that first Super Bowl. And he was like, yeah, we all missed it. Like, we didn't see it at all. And like, give them a fighting chance, because the way we see it is not, we see it in a 360 view. They see it in a 180 view, and it's not fair to them. And I think that can also apply to coaching. And I think to your point about Sean, I think if you step away, sometimes it gives you something that maybe you didn't know you needed, and it also gives you a little extra motivation to go back and try and improve on it.
Trey, you mentioned you wanted to get to Bill Belichick, so let's do that. I mean, here's the reality for Belichick. I don't see any roadmap for the Patriots to have a chance to win the Super Bowl in the next 3 years. It's just you mentioned Mahomes. We've already talked about Burrow. We talked about Josh Allen. If Tua stays healthy, Justin Herbert, and literally there's other teams that I think in the AFC are better than the Patriots, who are not Super Bowl contenders. So unless Mac Jones becomes one of these guys, and I think Mac Jones may become good, but he's not going to become one of these guys, at least in my opinion. There's no role for Belichick. So if you're him, I know you love coaching, I'm sure you love the money that you're paid. You like the fame and all that stuff, but he does like to win. And I do think at a certain point, if you're Bill, the greatest coach of all time, you have to be honest with the situation, right? And know what's in front of you and know that you're not winning another Super Bowl with this group. So what do you do?
Well, not only Bill, let's talk about the other side of it, which is Robert, as in Robert Kraft. Remember, on more than one occasion, Bill was ready to move on from Tom, and the Kraft said, hold up on that. Okay, like when Jimmy Garoppolo was traded to the 49ers at the trade deadline a couple of years ago, he wasn't shocked. He wasn't like, it was basically Tom and the Krafts deciding we don't want a threat here, and they basically just shipped him out against Bill Belichick's wishes. That's been well documented, especially by my former colleague at ESPN, Seth Wickersham, and the great reporting he did on that. So there's been a loggerheads, okay, over that before. Well, now we'll look at the 3 years post Tom Brady, okay? 2020 COVID season, Cam Newton disaster, they missed the playoffs. 2021, they sneak in with Mac Jones as a rookie and get just boat raced by the Bills in the wild card game. 2022, they missed the playoffs. Now, Richard, you've been to Foxborough, right?
I have.
Okay, John, I don't know if you've ever been to a game at Foxborough.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay. There is nothing in Foxborough outside of that stadium and that complex.
The outlet mall,
okay?
Trey.
Yeah,
The outlet mall.
Yes. So what people don't understand, you haven't been to a game at Foxborough. It's this tiny little town in the middle of nowhere, and outside of the stadium, they have built, a bass fishing shop, a movie theater, restaurants, shops. All of those things are contingent upon one thing.
I wonder who owns all that stuff.
There you go. I think his last name might begin with a K.
That's right.
So all of that is contingent upon people wanting to go to where the Patriots play, because there's no other reason to go there otherwise. So forget Bill looking at the bigger picture and saying, can I win here? How about Robert Kraft saying, why aren't we winning here anymore since Tom left?